Hello and welcome to the Footy Interchange, a brand new podcast. Great to have you along wherever you're watching or listening along. My name's Adam Papalia. Do a bit of work for Fox Footy, bit of work for 6PR. Been in the game for a little while now. Alongside Will Schofield, of course, premiership player for the West Coast Eagles and multimedia superstar these days, Scully. But this is a brand new venture we've got.
It is Paps, BackChat Studios. This is our Tuesday show, of course, on BackChat. I'm excited to add someone of your credibility and tenure to the mix, because usually it's me, Hamish Brayshaw, Dan Collins, bit of a rat bag crew in here, but you're one of the best play-by-play callers I've seen go to work. Of course, we work together at 6PR and Fox Footy. Excited to bring this show into fruition a bit. I've got to say, I'm going to give you credit to the ideas around it. What is the concept of what we're doing here?
Well, okay. Normally I like to hide behind the microphone rather than being on the camera too much. So
I've seen that in work over many years.
Before. We were doing the headshots last week. It was very uncomfortable in here. But
start making you wear a suit in here.
Exactly. But no, I'm looking forward to it. I think for me it was more about, we got lots of footy shows, and I know you do a few as well, and we kind of look very much in our own backyard a fair bit, and I reckon we're guilty of it. We're based in WA, and we're guilty of it here, of just looking at West Coast and Freo and not having a bit of attention on the league. And if you're in Melbourne, you generally focus on the Victorian clubs. If you're in South Australia, it's only about the South Australian club. So I guess this show is a bit more about getting around the country and having a chat to people in those places and find out what people are actually talking about in those areas, because it's very different being on the ground somewhere as opposed to just shooting from afar and talking about things as to what the actual issues are in each state.
Well, I think the key point is quite often we don't know.
Yeah,
right. Because
exactly.
we're not there. We know. We'd like to think that we're pretty good with West Coast and Freo and Western Australia and Melbourne as well. I mean, we get fed a lot of information and shows out of Melbourne, but from my point of view, I'm excited to be able to bounce around the states, get someone in that state talking about what the issues are, and just get a little take on someone that's actually there.
Yeah, talk through the issues of the day, of the week, review a little bit of what's happened on the weekend as well, and also looking forward, but getting around the whole league rather than just focusing on one or two states or the news only from one spot or only focusing on one club. So hopefully people that are tuned in get a good idea of everything that's going on, particularly from an injury point of view, what's happening at other clubs. I know a lot of people have a very much a fantasy lens on things too. So
I do.
Drew Jones will be with us a little bit later on from Fox Sports, and he's also got his own we'll give a bit of insight into it in terms of his fantasy account that is going to be giving people a lot of information. But it's a way that you can be right across all the stuff. So we'll check in with Drew Jones in Victoria. Tommy Rockliff from Queensland is going to join us, of course.
Big addition in more ways than one, and you'll have to stay tuned to Adam Papalia's introduction of Tom. He's got a special request.
Very good character.
Good player too.
Yes. Fair bit of news out of WA today. So Eliza Reilly will talk to us about Freo and the news around Justin Longmuir's contract. Simeon Thomas Wilson will chat to us as well, if I can get his name right. And
out of Adelaide.
Adelaide Advertiser, Code Sports as well. He's on the ground there working as a journo. Will talk to us a little bit about, I'm keen to chat to him about the Port Adelaide coaching structure and what people actually think about that over there. But
that state's a pressure cooker.
Huge this year, I think, between the two of them. And Cal Sinclair as well from Sydney, who's over there. Of course, you played with him at West Coast.
Yeah, and one of the smarter types I've been around, and that's saying something for a ruckman. So I'm excited to chat to Sink, as he's working with ABC over there, as well as doing a few of his own business things as well. So Cal will give us something. I guarantee you that. He can be strong when he needs to, and I like that.
All right, on that note, let's get into it. Looking forward to the podcast this year, talking all things footy right around the country on the Footy Interchange. Well, let's head across to the Sunshine State, over there to Queensland, who I think a lot of Brisbane Lions supporters go still just riding high after winning the flag last year.
Which is fair enough.
I know, they're very, very impressive in the grand final. And I'm very pleased to say now we're going to go to a man who played over 200 games in the AFL with the Brisbane Lions and with Port Adelaide as well. And we kind of asked everyone how they wanted to be introduced in this one.
You're a nice man, and I don't know if you're going to go with this or not.
Well, I wouldn't normally go with this, but he said that was how we wanted wanted to be introduced. I would say 200 gamer, all Australian,
Yeah.
Brisbane Lions, Port Adelaide.
Legend.
He's working at the moment in commercial finance for Rockliff Finance as well. So give him a shout out and check in with him there as well. But he said, I would like to be introduced as a fat, slow midfielder who averaged 30. Tom Rockliff, welcome to you.
Paps, Scully, thanks for having me. Well, it's true. I mean, got guys running around, they can't work it out. It's just a matter of getting from contest to contest. And I had no speed, but found a way to find it, Scully.
Oh, just brilliant.
I think it was 32 actually in 2014, just a lazy 32 a game.
It doesn't surprise me. One of the great fantasy picks of all time. We're speaking to Drew Jones, of course, got a bit of a fantasy slant.
Yes.
Big fan of Tom Rockliff's work. So running his own business, Rockliff Finance, but of course he's going to be on our man on the ground in Queensland this year. I'm excited to have him. Thanks for being with us, mate.
No, thanks for the opportunity to jump on. And as Paps said, I think everyone's still riding high in Queensland. Fair bit of excitement around the Gold Coast Suns as well, what they can do. But I mean, the season was so close last year. You were thinking about Brisbane potentially missing finals at one point for the first half of the season, and they get the premiership. So looking forward to the season ahead.
It was one of the great finals runs too, from the position they were in a couple of games to the Brisbane Lions. Then they get to the grand final and they just dominate the Sydney Swans. You'd think Chris Fagan would be pretty happy with how things are going. He's won a flag. He's on top of the world. He's had plenty of doubters over the journey, but he's just taking the opportunity to have a bit of a crack at the AFL at the same time.
He certainly did. He didn't miss him from all reports. Obviously, the premiership coach gets to present to the AFL Commission within sort of the last month, I think, after the season. And from all reports, he didn't miss, hit him between the eyes, and was pretty upfront with the feedback, which I think a lot of AFL clubs feel the same, particularly interstate clubs. They feel unheard, undervalued, and I think it was just mentioned to them that they've got their priorities wrong. And I think everyone within the industry or on the periphery of that can agree with that. I mean, you've got that they're losing, they're not engaging with their major stakeholders, which are the players and the coaches, and trying to make real change. They're too worried about the aesthetics of the game. And I mean, the clear point there is when every club's contacted to have to make sure they have a female in their room on draft night, like, are we really at that point where that's the most important thing that the AFL is concerned about? So I think there's a real disconnect at the moment from the AFL and the clubs involved in the competition, so that they need to recalibrate that, particularly in AFL House, and get back to what they're there for. It's to produce the best quality that they can and make sure that they listen to their key stakeholders, being the coaches and players.
Well, and it's strong coming out of a football state and that's not Victoria, given the strength that we've seen in New South Wales and now Queensland with the premiership line there. I love it from Fags, to be honest. Another thing that I love is the Gold Coast Suns, got to be honest. I've given them as a complete lock to play finals this year. Not that my predictions make
I'm over them because I backed them to play finals last year and they let me down.
Well, there's nothing really to go off. I mean, you can't trust them because they've never done it. But they have to make it sometime. Gold Coast, Rocky, please, this year, please.
Well, you'd hope so. The challenging thing is fitting 13 into 8. Isn't it? I mean, you've got the top 8 from last year. You've got teams that miss that. Collingwood, we expect to be better. The Crows, everyone's talking about them potentially sneaking in. The Gold Coast Suns better again as well. How do those other Melbourne teams that just missed out, St Kilda and the like, do they push their way in? So it's a fascinating season, but it has to be for the Gold Coast Suns. They've got the most balanced team I think they've had in their history. They've got an elite midfield, Anderson, Miller, Rao through there. I think Jared Wicks is probably one of the most underrated ruckmen within the competition for a number of years. He's an absolute workhorse. He looks tired in the warm-up but finds a way to dominate the game and then still be tired at the end of it. But with adding Reilly and Noble off halfback, I think that those run and gun players, their delivery inside 50 is going to be really impressive. Mac Andrews, we know what he can do. Sam Collins in defence, you'd be a big fan of his. I'd imagine Scully and Will Powell as well, with that run off halfback. It just depends if their forwards can kick that score. I'd love to see King just do a bit more work off the footy. I mean, he plays a little bit like he's still playing junior footy. He tries to kick it on his head all the time and just get his separation at the point of launching for the footy. I'd love to see him do a lot more work off the footy. Jed Waltz has been impressive. There's a guy that has slipped under the radar, a boy from Moe. I think he's going to be an out-and-out star, Bailey Humphrey. He will take his game to another level. He had a bit of a quiet period last year, but the Gold Coast Suns, it just feels like the time's right. They were hot last Thursday night, I think it was, in that pre-season hit out against the Lions, and Collingwood, from reports from the Brisbane Lions, they were very vocal into them and up for the fight. So if you're starting that way, I think Dimmer's starting to have an impact, and really excited for what they can do this season.
With the Suns, it's always just felt like, you go up there for a bit of a holiday in Queensland, particularly on the Gold Coast, even as opposed to Brisbane. Damien Hardwick's been there another year now. That harder edge, I guess, that I think everyone's wanting from the Suns and being able to stamp themselves on the competition. How difficult is it to go about that being in sunny old Queensland?
Yeah, I think you'll see it this year. They've been pretty dominant at their home venue. I think they only coughed up 1 or 2 games late in the season. So it was a pretty tough road trip. They just didn't get it done on the road. So if they back that up, but also I think they're going to be, they remind me a little bit of a young Giants, where they had a mouthful, plenty to say when they hadn't done anything, but then they went on a bit of a roll. I think Gold Coast are in that sweet spot now to really build on those foundations. I think you give them a pass mark for last year. Dimmer's first year coming in, trying to implement a new game plan. Takes a little bit of time. I'm looking forward to the season ahead for them and what they can do.
Spending a bit of time with your good mate, Jack Redden, who was never too shy on the football field to give a little bit of lip. I hear that Tom Rockliff may have been in the same sort of areas. You'll be as excited as I am, I think, even though you're probably a little bit of a Brisbane man, to hear that they're on the verbals a bit. Like I like that. You got to back it up, which is fine. Yeah. You'd rather that than this Gold Coast side that we've seen for a number of years that they've been nothing, really. So you at least like them to take a step forward, put it on, opposition, and actually, and then they got to back it up. But that's going to be, proof's going to be in the pudding. Just to finish on Brizzy, Tom, Joe Danaher, big loss. And it's probably been all the talk, especially here in Western Australia, and the talk coming out. Is that going to be as big of a loss, you think, for Brisbane as what others are reporting?
Yeah, well, I don't think so. There's a bit of a murmur, Joe who, after the first practice game in Intra Club. There's two twin towers I'm going to go with. I think they're going to be dominant forwards for a number of years, particularly if they stay at the Lions. Logan Morris, premiership player already. His induction was rapid last year. Played a VFL game, ate some Maccas, drove to the game, didn't have boots. Will Ashcroft had to give him his boots, and he ran out there and debuted and played quite well and didn't look back. So outstanding debut. But there's another kid, Ty Gallup, who came through the academy, which I know the Southern States are going to be pumped with that. Another academy boy who bursting on the scene. He kicked 5 or 6 in their intra club on Harris Andrews, Ryan Lester. So they're key defenders. He went bang, bang, and then backed it up in a half of footy last week. I thought he was super impressive. He's got a bit of shit in him, which you love as a key forward to come out. So I think those two are going to carry that Brisbane Lions forward line into the future. Eric Hipwood's still coming back from a bit of groin soreness. So they've got weapons in that front half. But I think Logan Morris and Ty Gallup, by the end of the decade, will be the 2 dominant key forwards. And people coming up to the Gabba will be just like, how do we stop these 2?
Yeah,
that's scary.
Scary proposition. And then you throw Levi Ashcroft in there as well. Don't get me started on how they get access to him after winning the flag. Still a bit ridiculous, Tommy, but footy in Queensland looks like it's going to be pretty strong this year, mate. Great to have you on the show. Thanks very much for joining us.
No, thanks for having me.
Tom Rockliff there, of course, Rockliff Finance.
I might sign up to that.
Excellent midfielder
after that
across the journey
as well.
good
footballer, but it sounds like he's got it all sorted after footy too.
Selling himself short a little bit there, I think,
Correct.
as well, Scully. Queensland footy looking like it's going to be strong in 2025. You're on the Footy Interchange. Well, let's head out to New South Wales now, Scully, over across to Sydney and have a chat to one of your former teammates, a former Eagle, former Sydney Swan, as well as been doing a bit of radio work for the ABC too. We're talking, of course, of Cal Sinclair. How would you introduce him, Scully?
One of the smartest ruckmen I've played with.
Is that a long list?
It's not like that's meant to be a compliment, and it is. But smart ruckman, that's a short list.
That's good. Oh, okay, we've got the smartest ruckman going around in Cal Sinclair, who joins us now from over there to talk some footy in New South Wales. Cal, great to have you as part of the Footy Interchange.
Thanks very much. Great to be here. And I will correct you, Scully. It was the smartest backup ruckman.
that might be the intro for the rest of the year, I think. Cal, mate, really great to have you on the program and talking a bit of footy over there in New South Wales. That's what this show is about, is getting around the country and talking some things. But clearly, one guy who's been spoken about so much already is Chad Warner. He's allegedly already bought property over here in West Western Australia. He's going to be making his move. What's the feeling like over there in Sydney about what Chad Warner's going to do?
Well, it's probably the first big name player that Sydney's had for a long time that is really at risk of leaving. And not many, I guess, big high profile players leave the Sydney Swans. But I just think as an industry, we need to get a little bit stronger and a bit more mature. And I'd love to get Scully's opinion on this. But in my view, I think Chad Warner is as good as gone. And so he should be with the money that's there on the table with him from the Eagles and also Fremantle. And I think the most hilarious thing that he's done is that he's supposedly, I don't have this information on hand, he's apparently bought a property in Applecross. And I'm no geographic expert, but that's pretty much right in the middle of both clubs. So it'll be very interesting to see where he lands. But look, it's going to be a huge offer to, I guess, for the Swans to counter. Your money goes a lot further in Western Australia than it does here in Sydney. You're probably going to get a one-bedroom apartment for the money that they're going to be paying him. But over there in Western Australia, he'll have an acreage, he'll have everything at his disposal, and he'll be the biggest fish in the smallest pond. And for the Swans, and once again, I'll throw this to Scully as well, I think clubs have got to be not so scared of losing players. I think the Swans will get very well compensated. They don't want to lose him by any stretch of the imagination, but in my view, I think it'll be very, very hard for him to turn down.
Yeah, I think you're all over it, Sinker, our man on the ground in New South Wales. I think he's pretty much as good as gone too, but that's okay. I don't think that's a bad thing. But I guess the only point I would make on it is not all players are motivated by money. There's family, there's winning, there's different deals across different clubs, and it probably moves us into the next part of the conversation. On the other side of the bridge, the battle of the bridge, Finn Callaghan, he clearly is not motivated by money. You'd have to assume, given $17 million is being thrown around. I mean, Cal Sinclair, $17 million, you'd probably do anything, mate.
Mate, I'll tell you what, I'm not going to lie to you. I genuinely scratched my head. One, at the offer, because don't get me wrong, Finn Callaghan is a very good up-and-coming player. But for him to receive an offer, which is, I'm not sure how concrete it is, but if it's 10 years, $17 million for a player that not necessarily has, don't get me wrong, he's impacted the competition in certain ways, but we're not talking all Australians here. We're not talking best and fairest of any stretch of the imagination. It is, in my view, completely ludicrous that you would turn down that offer. But anyway, in saying that, St Kilda aren't necessarily as close to a flag or a premiership or success, nowhere near as close as to what the Giants are. I will say, though, in terms of a cultural piece, the Giants would be a very, very difficult club to leave. In terms of what they do internally, it is an awesome organisation, and I hear nothing but positive things. But the reality is, a lot of these players that do leave, they want to, I guess, have a bigger football experience in playing in front of massive crowds, big clubs, and it sounds like the money the money at other clubs is far greater than what the Giants can provide.
Yeah, the money is insane that's being floated around. It's obviously going to get bigger with Tassie coming in and the young players at that type of level coming through. But the success factor, Cal, that's going to be the interesting part, isn't it? Because the Giants, they were so close last year. They probably should have been playing in the grand final, given the position they were in the finals last year. What's the feeling like with footy in Sydney right now? Because you've got the Giants who feel like they're right on the cusp. The Swans who have made yet another grand final, unfortunately for them, lost it in bad circumstances. But they could be two of the very top teams in the comp again this year.
Well, this probably goes to my next point, and this is going to the AFL are going to absolutely hate what I'm about to say, is that the two best teams in the competition that play the absolute best brand are the Sydney Swans and the Giants, and they're based in New South Wales, a state that absolutely nobody cares about. So if both these teams make the grand finals, don't get me wrong, you'll get a massive turnout from the South Melbourne supporters there in Sydney, but the AFL would be literally praying that both these teams don't get into the last day in September. But mate, the feeling's very good. I struggle to see, probably outside of Brisbane, maybe a little bit of a glimpse of Collingwood, about who plays a more exciting and better and contemporary brand than both of these squads. Their midfielders are absolutely stacked. They've got the right age demographic. Their forward line, I guess, I think the forward line at the Giants with the inclusion of Jake Stringer it will add a ton of X factor to that forward line. I think they've had a lot of reliance on Jesse Hogan, and they're probably a little bit worried about, he's had 2 pretty amazing seasons. Can he actually handle that massive load and kick another 50 plus goals? And Toby Green didn't have the year that he had last year. But from a forward line perspective at the Swans, I'm going to say the heat's probably on them, particularly their key position players. I'd probably say you've got Joel Amati, Logan McDonald, and Hayden McLean. Both had great seasons last year, but can all 3 of those players play in the same side? I'm not too sure. But in terms of a total brand of football, mate, it's alive and well in here in New South Wales. I know you guys over there in WA, you're in your own little bubble. The Melburnians are in their bubble. But I'm sorry to say it, the 2 best teams and the best brands of football are being played in New South Wales.
What I tell you, Cal's an elite operator.
He is. That's why we got you on the show, mate. Great to have a chat today. Looking forward to talking some footy around the Giants and the Swans throughout the year. And so good to have the smartest backup ruckman in AFL history on the program.
Exactly right. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, mate. Cal Sinclair there, a great former teammate of yours, Scully, who I know you enjoy his work. And $17 million, Phil Callahan. Sorry, not Phil Callahan.
Phil Callahan.
Phil Callahan.
Phil.
Finn Callahan. What would you do for $17 million?
I'd do this show every day. There'd be a property in each state, which is work with the Footy Interchange as well. I'd do just about anything.
Couple in Applecross.
17 mil.
Well and truly, I think that'd get you a bit. Chad Warner as well, looking down a fair bit of cash too. You're on the Footy Interchange. Well, let's head to Victoria now. We've been a little bit sneaky here, Scully, because we're going to Victoria to get the latest on the ground happening over there in the state that they say is the home of footy. But we've actually just sneakily implanted a West Australian in Victoria to talk about Victorian things.
I like it.
As we go across to Drew Jones, of course, from Fox Sports. He's got a little side project that we're going to be excited to talk about as well. I'm pretty sure we can go into the bunker right now with Drew Jones. Drewy, great to chat to you, mate.
Hey, Paps, Scully. Yeah. Are you hearing me all the way from Melbourne, loud and clear here?
Yeah, we do have communication lines set up from Western Australia to Melbourne. Great to speak to you, mate. We just got to touch on quickly a bit of background.
Clearly.
Like what's happening back here? We got premiership memorabilia?
Yeah, so this was a gift from a friend of mine. This is actually from the newspaper after the 92 flag.
Nice.
It's even got a funny little insert here. I don't know how that happened, but I think it adds a bit of character. That's 2006, which I was in my vintage. Like I was 15 at the time. Perfect footy obsessed age. Cuz waggling the finger and all that. And then I've got a couple of bonus ones.
But wait, there's more.
That's Scully. That's you. Lockdown job on Jordan DeGoey.
Thank you.
Won a couple of crucial one-on-ones. And then
he's got them all.
The 94. Yeah, so that
94.
Just waiting to add a 5th one. Probably not in 2025, but
yeah, well, I mean, it is possible.
Currently, everyone is on equal points right now.
Yeah.
But yes, you can't take the Perth out of the boy. That's probably the lesson here.
Well, you have been, of course, in Melbourne for quite some time, doing a great job over there for Fox Sports, of course, mate, which is why we've got you on the Footy Interchange, just to talk about what's going on the ground over there, even though you've sneakily got the West Coast stuff in the background. But I know you've given a little bit of a clip to the Geelong supporters down there with those premiership posters in the background. But let's talk about one of the Cats and one of their biggest recruits.
Well, yeah, the Cats have got probably a few more reasons to be optimistic than West Coast right now. So Bailey Smith not playing against Essendon tonight. So there was a bit of a scare sent through. I think Xander Maguire put the tweet out saying, he's got a sore knee and that's why he's not playing. I just wanted to sort of check in with the Cats today. So they've said that Smith played in the recent match sim and he looked really good. And I've been to enough Geelong sessions during this preseason to know that, as usual, he is looking in exceptional nick and doing absolutely everything on the track. But clearly they're just being cautious coming off the ACL. So he was always going to play one of the two, either the AAMI Community Series or in the match sim. And it just, I think, made more sense from a management perspective for the Cats to play him really managed minutes in probably a slightly less intense game in the match sim, then rest him for the Community Series and then have him ready to go for opening round Thursday night against Brisbane to open the season. So there's no concerns over Bailey Smith's knee. There's not been any sort of niggle. There's no setbacks he's absolutely locked and ready to go for opening round, and he'll come out and probably explode and have 30 and kick 3.
There'll be plenty of Geelong fans listening to this, and of course, like I'm a Victorian implanted in Western Australia, right? A Geelong man, in fact. So it's good to hear Bailey Smith, I guess, not worse fears realised. St Kilda, I just don't think they would have been overly happy with the last week of publicity that they've received around Finn Callaghan, $17 million. I don't think it makes the club look good that he's turned that down. Injuries, how's their list looking? I mean, to me, St Kilda, I don't know, they have their issues. What's the update there?
Yeah, it's such a funny season for St Kilda, isn't it? I feel like they've had a shocking pre-season in terms of injuries. Max King had that scare with his knee. They thought maybe he'd done his ACL. And then this really interesting injury update they put out a few weeks ago where it was Mateus Philippou, which is like their big young hope, has a stretch fracture. He's out for 12 weeks. And then it said that Rowan Marshall had this stress-related pelvis issue. Then Ross Lyon came out and said, no, there's no stress fracture. He's fine. So just the latest on Rowan Marshall. He's not going to play this weekend. So St Kilda play on Saturday. He is back in basically full training, I'd say 95%, but they're not going to go too early with Big Row. So they give Harry Boyd another chance to lead the ruck in the community series this weekend for the Saints. And then Marshall, all things going well, it sounds to me like he's going to be right to go in round 1 away against Adelaide, but he's coming in off limited prep, but he's an absolute superstar. So I think sort of from a fantasy perspective, we're interested in Harry Boyd as our R3. In draft, are you taking Rowan Marshall with pick 2 after Tristan Cherry? These are all things you need to consider. Apart from just the football side of things, fantasy, Rowan Marshall's a big player. So he will be there, it sounds to me, like round 1, but the prep for him hasn't been great. And just on Sinclair quickly, he's still trending in the right direction to be right to go in round 1 after the hamstring. But again, he went into last year with a calf, this year with a hamstring. Guy's an absolute gun, but unfortunately not the best prep for the season.
So can I touch on the fantasy stuff? And this is, I think, excitingly something you're going to be bringing to us this year, Drew, and the rest of the footy world. GOAT Fantasy. You can talk through that name in a second. But I took Jack Sinclair in a draft, I think with round 2 pick. Didn't realise he was injured. I don't know what rock I've been hiding under, but that's scary for me. But you're going to have a little fantasy slant on a lot of the stuff you're going to be providing us this year, which I like, Drew. Explain it a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm pretty passionate about my fantasy sports, and I know you guys are as well. Like, I feel like, I'm talking to the perfect people in terms of fantasy-wise. But, I tend to find that I'm probably more interested in following the news around the really key fantasy players. And I think there's a lot of people out there who want the updates during the week, particularly on social media. So I've got my normal Twitter account, just Drew Jones Fox, which I feel like is sort of all encompassing. And then I'm sort of starting another area, which is going to be GOAT Fantasy, which is going to be a mixture of content, some stuff with you guys, and just updates from the field about fantasy specific players. So if I'm tweeting from my normal account, I don't think that many people are going to care about Josh Smiley really. But in terms of like having a fantasy rookie that's like relatively cheap, and at the moment there's like a few issues with some of the more expensive rookie midfielders. If he is a chance to play in round 1, I'm going to be, on the ground watching training, hopefully giving updates on, just for instance, Josh Smiley. But yeah, that's sort of the plan. So launching really soon, and it'll just be all the fantasy news you could possibly want. I'm not going to position myself as an expert. I haven't won a Hilux or any of the comps, in the fantasy salary cap format.
Not yet.
I am coming off a flag for the Mountain Goats last year in the Betty Woko Cup. So I've got fantasy chops in my own league. But yeah, so a bit of fun, talks from footy, and so fantasy news, all you can get.
So GOAT Fantasy is the place to go. And
it's not greatest of all time. But
no, it doesn't sound like it. The Mountain Goats, that's what it is. Is that right? Or
yeah, that's been my fantasy name since high school. So it continues to roll on.
Brilliant. We'll follow that with interest. I've got my draft next week, I think, which we're negotiating.
What pick do you got?
I actually don't know yet, to be honest. That's how I'm not all that across it just yet. We're still arguing about when the keeper deadline finishes and how many keepers we're going to have, and we're going to have our draft like the night before the season starts.
Can I just tell you?
We're very unorganised this year.
Can I just quickly share, 20 seconds here, one of the great butcherings of all time by me. So the draft order was worked out by we had to pick an NBA player for the next day, and it was points scored.
That's fun.
I took the big fella. This isn't 20-second story. Big fella plays for the Pelicans. Hey?
Zion Williamson.
He drops a 30. I get pick 3. I log on. I go to make my pick 3 selection. I'm going to take a defender or a forward. Somehow, Nick Dacos ends up in my auto pick. None of my picks work, and I have Nick Dacos with pick 3, and then I take Jack Sinclair in the second round. It's a real butchering from my behalf.
I don't think Dacos and Sinclair is a bad first 2 picks, though.
Thank you
could
very
both
much,
go
Goat.
110 plus.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you
It's
very
not
much,
just
Goat.
about round 1, as footy clubs always say. It's about the whole season, right?
Fair enough.
You make your picks now. I'm right into my NBA fantasy towards the finals at the moment. So
Daily
I've got
operation,
it's a lot of work.
It's a
and
lot.
I'm not as invested as everybody else. So it takes me a fair bit to get. I wake up in the morning like, I haven't set my lineup again.
PJ Washington's out. No.
Yeah, exactly. If only I had Goat Fantasy, the NBA, that could tell me everything that was going on. AFL is going to be good. But we also, Drew, we're going to talk some serious footy with you right the way through. I want to put it on the line with you right now, though. All the clubs in Victoria, we know which ones are going to be good. Who's under the most pressure right now? Who's under the pump before a ball's even been kicked in anger?
Yeah, I think it's Melbourne. They've made so many changes off field. We had the Christian Petrarca. Firstly, that health story last year with the ruptured spleen and the fractured ribs. I mean, that was horrible for him. And then the fact that he came into the club and he wanted to talk to the players and explain the fact that he'd essentially asked for a trade despite having 6 years to run on a contract. It's been this ongoing saga where we've talked about our culture, and it's not the first time that we've had these conversations about the Demons. So from my perspective, after missing the finals last year and being fairly disappointing, and they also haven't really delivered in finals since winning the flag in 2021, I think there's pressure on Simon Goodwin and there's pressure on Melbourne senior players to perform. I actually quite like the Demons list. I think if they can just elevate their forward connection, start turning their clearances into scores, I think they can be a good team. They can win plenty of games, but I think the pressure is on Simon Goodwin to show that he can lead this program out of the doldrums culturally, off field, get things right on the field. Clayton Oliver's in a better space. Hopefully Petrarca's right to go for the start of the season, coming off the cracked rib subsequently after the injuries last year. So yeah, I think it's the Demons where there's a pretty harsh spotlight on them to see how they handle the year off the field, and then does that translate into wins on it.
Brilliant stuff, Drew. Great to chat to you, mate. Looking forward to chatting through the year from the secret West Coast bunker over there in Victoria somewhere with the premiership posters in the background, mate. Great to chat to you. We'll keep an eye out on Goat Fantasy. We'll chat to you next week.
Gentlemen, thanks for having me.
Drew Jones there from Fox Sports, and of course from Goat Fantasy as well, Scully. Yes. I reckon the D's, they're one of those, and there's a few of them in the league this year that can either go really, really well or be really terrible, and it's hard to get a read on exactly where they're going to finish.
Well, you know where my predictions usually lie, somewhere between not good and very bad for the season upcoming. I've said Melbourne to play finals. They're my lock to come up into the 8. I think, although I agree with Drew, pressure's on Melbourne, Carlton's another side that, just by literal nature of their football club and the following they have, I think there's a lot of pressure on them. Plus the injuries are starting to cop. Like Carlton, for mine, is probably in that realm, but Melbourne, a lot of pressure as well.
Yeah, I can't get a read on the Pies either.
Missing
finals last year after winning a flag.
Yeah.
How are they going to go this year? Can they bounce back to where they've been before? Is going to be really interesting. Great to chat to Drew Jones there on the Footy Interchange. Well, let's head across to the city of Churches and check in on footy in South Australia. Sky, I reckon it is shaping as a really interesting year for both of these clubs. So much going on at Port Adelaide, so much expectation around the Crows as well. Simeon Thomas Wilson is with us, of course, from the Adelaide Advertiser and Code Sports, a man on the ground. He knows everything that's going on in South Australian footy right now. Simeon, great to chat to you, mate, and talk a few things over there in South Australia. And, of course, mate, I reckon this year is shaping as such an interesting year for the Crows. They've promised a lot for a while, but I imagine the pressure's starting to ramp up on them a bit.
Hey, guys. Yeah, thanks for having me. Great to be on the show. I guess really with the Crows now, there's no more excuses for them. They've been a team that's had excuses for years for why they haven't made finals. I guess in 2023, it was the non-awarded goal against Sydney last year. They came in with all this expectation. We thought they were going to play finals, and then they said they got injuries, concussion, a bad start. But now they've had a really good off season. The team looks strong. They have depth. There's no excuses for them. They have to make finals this year.
So what about on the other side of town? I look at Port Adelaide and Adelaide as the biggest rivalry in footy. Like there's Carlton and Collingwood, there's West Coast Freo. That's gone to you-know-what because West Coast have been no good.
Well, especially after last year. I was lucky enough to do the showdown last year for Fox. And with what happened with Isaac Rankin and Dan Houston.
There's genuine spite.
Hatred.
So Port Adelaide, I think as much as there's pressure on Adelaide, Port Adelaide haven't been able to get it done. So what's their year shaping like? Because I think there's a lot of pressure on them, especially with Ken Hinkley in that situation.
Oh, yeah, definitely. They're really going to be interesting to watch. Going early with a succession plan, formalising it, even though we kind of all knew that it was or we assumed that it was going to happen at some point. But yeah, just looking at them, they haven't been able to get to the grand final, but they make finals. They make prelims. Their home and away record's really good, but they just when they get to that spot at the preliminary final, they can't get over the line. So you'd imagine they're about around the mark again this year, given their teams. Yes, they've lost Dan Houston and Charlie Dixon, but their forward line could actually be even better, given they were so Charlie Dixon reliant in the past. Now it's going to be a bit smaller, a little more faster, a little more. They're going to play up the ground a lot more, and then with their defensive stocks, I mean, they've got some guys who can replace Dan Houston. The big worry at the moment is going to be their tall defenders because they're pretty short at the moment with injuries. Only just Eliza and Jeremy Finlayson's going back there at the moment.
The Ken Hinkley stuff happened, in the last couple of weeks. What's the feeling on the ground over there, though, amongst the Port fans as to whether this was the right call?
Yeah, I think people are kind of split. Like, you can see why they did it, because it'd be another year of questions for Ken. What your future looks like. But they lose a game. All of a sudden the pressure ramps on him, and I guess it gives everyone clarity. He seems like, speaking to him, he seems almost like a weight's been taken off his shoulders in a way, like seems relieved. He's jokes around with you a bit. Yeah, I think the big thing is why go another year with Ken when Josh Carr is your man. I think, is it the right call to give him one more year? That's kind of what Port fans are kind of debating, really.
Well, you got that transition period coming up now with Josh Carr and into the future. I think it creates a little bit of a headache sometimes, Sky, in terms of who's in charge and who you're trying to.
I hate it, mate. It's a prolonged firing of Ken Hinkley, as far as I can see. Like this handover period, you either want him as your coach or you don't. And the 12-month handover period, I don't know what Ken will be doing there. And I think for guys like Zach Butters, who I just read this morning. I think one of the men on the ground over there, I can't remember exactly who said Zach Butters is out the door. It having as much as gone. What do you think, Simeon?
Well, it's an interesting one because he's still contracted until the end of next year where he enters free agency, but there seems to be a little bit of a feeling or an acceptance that he actually might be the one. He might at the very least explore free agency. So I guess that's where it's all kind of coming from with him.
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting watch. Simeon, great to chat to you, mate. Check out your stuff on Code Sports and Adelaide Advertiser as well. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, really interesting situation. I think the coaching structure, Scully, makes it a little concerning, I think, for Port fans in some regards in terms of who's in charge this year and players that are trying to secure a spot at the club into the future. Who are they going to this year? Are they talking to Ken Hinkley about this stuff, or are they going to Josh Carr early?
I hate it, and I just think it's a really interesting landscape in Adelaide this year, both sides. And we didn't speak as much about Adelaide, but I think that coaching situation with Matty Nix, as well as what's happening in Port Adelaide, like that's the state that you're watching what's happening. And acquisitions for both sides, like they're both not where they want to be. Port Adelaide want a premiership. Adelaide want to be playing and winning finals. It's just a really interesting state to be watching this year, and it was good chatting to Simeon today.
We'll talk about it as the year goes on, but one word, Crows playing finals this year?
No.
Oof. All right, we'll explore that as we get through the year. Sorry, Crows fans. Too bad, not playing finals, apparently, according to Scully.
You asked for one word.
Whack. Just goes, no chance. I actually reckon the Crows will go all right this year. I'm a little bit more confident about them playing in the 8 for
one
sure.
One word, do they play finals?
Yes. So we're split here on the couch. We'll debate it as we go through. This is the Footy Interchange. Well, big news out of the West today with a contract extension of sorts for Justin Longmuir, the Freo coach. Scully, I know we're going to talk through this one in a bit of depth today, but Eliza Reilly is one of the great journos in town, award-winning journalist over here in the West, and we can chat to her now to find out what it actually means to be going on like a salary contract. I'm not quite sure exactly how it works, but she's actually at Freo at the moment. Eliza, just waiting to have a chat to the Fremantle coach. Thanks very much for joining us on the Footy Interchange. What do you make of all of this, and can you explain it for us as to how this operation is actually going to work? So it's a contract extension for Justin Longmuir, but it's got a bit of a difference.
Yeah, and thank you for acknowledging my brilliant studio here. Passing live to you guys from the Fremantle car park. But
glamorous
yeah,
on the road.
It's a really interesting one. It's sort of like a vote of some confidence, and it seems that Fremantle are pretty sure that Justin's the guy, but they're still leaving themselves a little bit of wriggle room if he isn't, which, to be completely honest, isn't that different to what would be a normal contract extension and a fixed term, which we see very often in the AFL, and what Justin is currently on, given that deal sort of expires at the end of this season. That 1-year contract he signed basically 12 months ago, almost today, on the eve of the 2024 season. So basically what it means, if you cut through all the footy club jargon and the sort of PR spin on it, not much has really changed. It's a matter of perform, win games, get Fremantle back to finals, or his future will be in the barrel. Basically what it has done is really stripped away that sort of opportunity for external noise, which we know has been a big factor in Justin's decision last year to accept that 1-year contract extension. So it's sort of, I guess, a joint show of faith from Fremantle and Justin to sort of rid themselves of what could be a bit of scuttlebutt if the Dockers lost a few games early in the season.
So to me, it just sounds like he's now like the rest of us. He's just he's just got an employment contract. I don't know what the fuss is. I like it. We've heard Justin speak about this in the past, that he doesn't like the external chat, and I suppose who does? But I'm with you, Eliza, and it's good to get an actual dial on what this means, because I think a lot of people are looking at it going, I don't really understand it. Now, it's staying in Fremantle. So Reed's, I think Harley Reid. I also think Archer Reid. Hey, Phil Reid used to play for West Coast, but there's another Reid in town.
Yes, and he's in purple, Scully, and he had quite the game on the weekend in Fremantle's intra-club, playing in their sort of A team. So we haven't seen the Dockers too often go best against the rest in match sim and intra-clubs this pre-season, but that was certainly on the case on Sunday. And Murphy Reid, wearing the number 16 that David Mundy made so famous, was looking a little bit Mundy-esque in the way he's able to slow down time and be a really valuable contributor for that Fremantle sort of midfield, but also playing in the forward line. The question is whether he's sort of jumped ahead of the likes of Neil Erasmus and Matthew Johnson, who are two guys who are now coming into their 4th season at the club. We really thought Erasmus was going to take the next steps in his career this year after a brilliant sort of waffle finals campaign, culminating in that Simpson medal for best on ground. And someone like Matt Johnson has built himself up to be a big-bodied midfielder who's also got the stamina to sort of run on the outside and play a bit of wing. But Murphy Reid just looks so skillful. He was described as Cal Toomey, who's a well-renowned, obviously, draft expert, as probably the most skillful player in the draft, which is saying something given the depth of the draft we've just seen. So he's certainly pressing his round 1 claims, and he might just knock Harley off the back page of the local paper.
Tough thing to do. But the way he was flicking the footy around in that match team, he looked very, very good. So we mentioned the Reids, so Murphy Reid, Archer Reid.
So what, Phil?
Phil Reid. We can also read everything that Eliza does on Code Sports as well, of course. You like that one?
Calm down.
Harley Reid. I was surprised to see him playing in the match sim the other day, and he was back to his trademark stuff.
Yeah, read the room. There's a bit of reading going on in here, but I think that Harley was Obviously had that interrupted pre-season. He's dealt with concussion. He's dealt with lower sort of ankle soreness. He's dealt with scar tissue. And I think there were sort of few reservations about whether he could continue that brilliant form we've seen from him so often during his career so far. But he put all of those doubts absolutely to bed in this intra-club and produced a scintillating performance. He only played the 3 quarters. He was obviously subbed off for the last, just to manage that load and that build to round 1. But to be honest, watching West Coast training this summer, we haven't seen him really at that sort of level. He's tried a few fend-offs and he's been caught. He hasn't shown that sort of turn of speed we've seen from him in that goal of the year against Petrarca and that famous Melbourne performance he put out on the park last year. So to watch him in full flight essentially again is really exciting signs, and I don't think we're going to see a plateau from him as some may have feared this year.
Eliza, love your work. We'll let you get back to the glamorous lifestyle of an on-the-road journo down there in Coburn and go and have a chat to Justin Longmuir and Simon Garlick. Thanks so much. We'll chat to you next week. And she's off.
Yeah.
She's straight out.
She's gone.
Straight out the door. Had to get to the presser.
So Harley Reid.
Yep.
Right. If I've got a bit of a read on him, I'm going to stop now.
This is the sort of areas I thought we'd get
We're
into,
gonna
just
stop
not this
now.
quickly.
It's just very simply, and he's a very simple player, I think. He loves playing footy with his mates, and he's not going to be setting the world on fire during pre-season. He may not even look $1 million in November, December, January, but as we get closer to games and the real stuff starts, that's the sort of player he is. He needs to be in an environment that he's competing and it means something. And you can see that. The way he's motivated is he wants to win and compete against people. And in November, you're just not doing that. He's like, I guarantee you, I was a similar player. Not like Harley Reid in terms of quality. But how I was...
Sorry, hold on.
No,
Hold on, can we just roll back on the tape there,
Will
please?
Schofield compares himself to Harley Reid. I mean how I was motivated.
Right.
November, December, you're literally sitting there going, what are we doing here? Okay, let's get fit. Let me play.
Yeah.
And you can see that's him. And to hear Eliza say, we haven't seen this all preseason, it's because in his mind, he'd be like, this doesn't matter.
I reckon within 24 hours we'll see a highlights tape of Will Schofield's don't argues throughout his career.
I had a good one.
Yeah.
I would say one of the better ones I've seen, to be honest. Not as good as Harley's, though.
Stay tuned on your socials to see that video shortly. The biggest story, we've got to talk about a little bit more.
Yes.
Justin Longmuir today,
Yeah.
with the contract being moved around and put on a salary effectively rather than a fixed term, because he'd sort of been going year to year as they figure out whether they wanted him to be the guy to take the club forward. How does it sit with you on first hearing that this is what Freo's done?
I like it. I think there'll be a fair bit of questioning because people don't understand it, and it goes against the norm. There's only been 2 other coaches to do it. Brendan Bolton was one of those guys, and North Melbourne David Noble. And neither ended well, I might add.
True.
So they lasted for under 12 months, both of those guys, and they were sacked. But if Justin Longmuir went and did a 3-year deal, right, as the norm goes with coaches, he can still be sacked.
Yeah.
And he can still be sacked under this. So it's not whether he can keep his job or whether he's more protected. I like it from that quietening down. We'll talk about it this week and then we won't speak about it again. And I say from media types. But what I do think that hasn't really been spoken about much, I think he would have signed a better deal because of it. In the short term.
Yeah.
Like he is foregoing the ability to have a 4-year contract that needs to be paid out if it doesn't go well. So they'll be paying him more in the short term because of it. If all parties are happy, Freo and Justin, I think it achieves everything you need to, and I don't see it as a bad result.
So it's a bit of security, I think, for the club in some regards, that they can make a change if they want to, and you wouldn't get into the situation like we saw at West Coast last year, where there was, or the year before with Adam Simpson, where maybe things would have moved quicker had he not had such a guaranteed long contract in place that saw him continue. Things may have finished a little bit earlier.
Yes.
But for Justin, I think for him, he's backing himself in to do the job, get it done, and take Freo where he wants to take them. And if he does that, then he will be well looked after and he'll be at the club for a long time.
We like to bring you all things breaking across Australia on the Footy Interchange. And just in Paps, Callum Mills, who of course is returning after a year of injury last year with the shoulder at Mad Monday, he has torn his plantar fascia, which is in your foot. Sometimes needing surgery, but mostly it's rest. But he's not going to be back until after the round 3 bye. Really interesting case in Sydney, Callum Mills. I think the midfield had moved past him, to be honest, with Warner, Goulden, Rowbottom and Heaney.
Yep.
He was going to be on a back flank anyway, but the captain...
he's such an important part to their team.
So he's out until
he was in
after
that
round
race
3.
to get back last year after the pre-season injury that shouldn't have happened the year before. That's a big blow for him, I reckon. And maybe they're saying at the moment that it's not going to be that long if he's back by round 3. But you think for him as captain, coming back, having a solid pre-season, wanting to have an impact on a group that's trying to find their footy identity after what happened last year and get back to winning ways, that's a pretty big blow.
Yeah, that injury is the one that you hear about Robert Harvey. I saw Josh Kennedy do it, jumping off a higher building or structure and then snapping it. So if you snap it, it actually recovers better unless if it's teared.
To confirm, he didn't jump off a building.
No, not yet.
Like jumped off a table or something.
Table or bed.
Robert
I was
Harvey
looking
did
for
the same
structure.
thing.
I said building. I was looking for structure. It's like a couch
He
or a
jumped off a
bed.
10-story building to snap
The
him.
Harbour Bridge.
So that's not good for Callum Mills.
Just in.
We'll talk to Cal Sinclair about that next week, of course, and the ramifications that might have for the Sydney Swans, but a bit of a dent to them for their season. Scully, been a great first show.
Yep.
Been good to be involved. Thanks to all of our guests that have jumped on from right around the country. We won't obviously always just talk about WA stuff on this. We want to talk about the whole league and everything that's going around and keep people up to date.
As long as the record button's been pressed, I dare say for the first episode, a pretty seamless transition into
That's
what
good.
is going to be a really exciting show, the Footy Interchange, bringing all the news and everything going on, not just out of Melbourne.
Yep, we'll figure out ways for you guys to get involved and send us a few questions as well for some of our guests on the way through. Scully, thank you very much to you, to the team for putting the show together. We'll be back again next week. This has been the Footy Interchange.